I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what do you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com. That's BLUEHOST.com to start now.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I am so glad you're here. We challenge conventional thinking about customer experience because I believe that improving experiences isn't just good for business, it's a powerful way to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Each week, we feature thought-provoking conversations with industry thought leaders from a variety of backgrounds, offering unique perspectives and actionable insights. Get ready to sharpen your leadership and transform your approach to customer experience. Let's dive in. Well, I am so excited today to have back on the show Bruce Temkin. Bruce is the co-founder of the CXPA, Customer Experience Professionals Association. He also founded the XM Institute that was part of Qualtrics, and now he's heading up this thing called Humanity at Scale, which we're going to dig into. We're going to understand where it overlaps with customer experience management, where it takes maybe get new legs. Bruce is the heart of CXM, in my opinion, one of the Mount Rushmore figures on it. Bruce, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. And I feel like I'm 2 steps towards my 5-step appearance on the podcast where I get like a robe, right? Don't you do that for your fifth appearance?
Yeah, you get the robe, and then we get to 12 steps, you get a coin.
Nice.
Yeah, for saying you've overcome whatever it is your issue is.
And I have many.
Yeah, you and me both. Well, I'm so honored and grateful to have you back on the show. You've been on a couple of times before. Last time you were in transition, you were getting ready to leave what was a great run at the XM Institute and you were doing a little bit of a pause, and then you were going to relaunch your new thing, which is Humanity at Scale. For the audience, in case they're not familiar with the XM Institute and what you were brought in to do and what that organization was able to accomplish, could you shed some light on that for some folks?
Sure. So in 2018, my company Temkin Group was acquired by Qualtrics. We were like a research and advisory company. Most of the people in the customer experience industry knew us probably because of our published research, right? We researched lots of data and did a lot of ratings and things. So we were acquired by Qualtrics for the goal of creating an institute that would lead the world in understanding experience management, which for your listeners is sort of a combination of customer experience, employee experience, so partner experience, all the experiential elements tied to different audiences. So what we did is we created what I believe was the most robust institute of learning around experience management. We published research, we published thought pieces, we created certifications, we created a high-end certification for professionals. We created what I would call, low-end probably isn't right, but introductory certification for anyone who wanted to understand experience management certified. And it was a global institute that we ran and had following in all the regions around the world. And my team was also based around the world. So the purpose which we fulfilled, I think, really effectively, was to teach professionals and executives around the world how to think about and implement experience management, which from the sounds of it really does sound like a continuation of what I was doing at Temkin Group, which was a continuation of what I was doing at Forrester Research before that.
Yeah. And as one who benefited both from your work at Temkin and then later on at XM Institute, lots of gratitude for CX leaders who were trying to educate, inform key stakeholders in their organization and kind of answer the question, well, what is this and why do we need it? You know, both Temkin and XM Institute were incredibly great resources for us based on all the hard work and research, grunt work that your folks did to be able to come back with something tangible. And I was in banking, so, you know, bankers are looking for numbers and data, and you were a great resource for that.
Well, thank you. One of the things I did early on was two things that sort of informed the content that I published and my teams published. The first was I always thought of myself as a business leader. I was never like a customer experience person. I always I thought about business and how businesses operate and what drives business. So I published things that were interesting to me as a business person. It turned out that those had wide appeal, which was good. So my interests aligned with a lot of others. And the second thing I tried to do is make squishy ideas come to life with concrete models and data. Right. That, you know, there are lots of things that people talk. I remember when people were starting to talk about voice of the customer a couple decades ago. Mm-hmm. And they talk generically about you need to do the voice of the customer. And I can still remember the first presentation I did at, we had created the first ever Forrester customer experience event. Mm-hmm. And someone asked me about voice of the customer. And I said, okay, voice of the customer is these 4 things. You listen, interpret, respond, and monitor. And I talked about what those elements were. And I saw everyone in the audience was like writing down really quickly, because what I had done in that moment is given them a structure to understand and think about a concept that they cared about. And that's sort of what I've always tried to do with the content we create, which is give people a grounding and a deeper way to understand a concept that they either should be interested in or already are interested in.
Yeah. And, you know, there were several of those that I was able to pull from, thanks to you. But is there one of those metrics or measurements or models that you use that you maybe can go back and point to and say, that was really good?
Yes. We had, there's so many of them, but I would probably go back to the Temkin Experience Ratings. So when I was at Forrester, I created the Customer Experience Index, which was looking at hundreds of companies and looking at this experience in 3 areas, pretty much success, effort, and emotion. So I recreated that around the Temkin Experience Ratings. But instead of putting it behind a firewall, we gave it away for free. So not only did we give like a synopsis of the research, we gave all of it to the public at large. And that ended up giving lots of people access to data around experience. And we looked at, 300-400 companies. And that was really, really valuable in terms of getting widespread access to customer experience data out there. And so we did a lot of analysis off of that data, but I would say that was the coolest thing. And we started to get, and I'll say one of the cool things about that was when USAA actually started to do a couple of ads based on our data, right? Seeing, the footnotes and referencing our data. And so that was kind of cool. But to me, it was all about how do we get, not how do we get data, but how do we get data in the hands of people that can do something with it that's valuable? Yeah.
So a couple of points I want to double click on there. For those listening who may not be familiar with, I think it also became later on called the CXI.
Yes.
So we used it at the bank, and success essentially, correct me if I'm wrong here, success is were you successful in what you aimed to do as a customer?
Pretty much.
What was the effort level that it took you? Was it hard? Was there a lot of friction around you being able to do what you wanted to do? And then emotional, how did you feel about the experience as you went through it?
Yeah, so I think those are all right. And let me give you like a little color on each of those. Please. So success is pretty straightforward. Were you able to do the thing that you wanted to do, right? Interesting enough, there's been an effort movement over the years. I started tracking effort a decade before the effort movement came in. And people started talking about effort. And I think that the way that we measured effort, while not perfect, was much better than the effort metrics that came up afterwards. There were introduction like, to what degree was this thing, difficult to do, or to what degree did you exert energy? All those types of questions were crazy. Ours were very simple, which is, on a scale from very easy to very difficult, how did you find it, right? And that's been a pattern of the advice that I've given to companies, and the data that we've published is that measures should reflect how human beings actually think about a situation, because otherwise their answers are meaningless, right? If I ask you a question in a direction you don't understand about a dimension that you can't internalize, then you can give me a response, you can check a box, but it's meaningless because it doesn't resonate clearly to you. So our effort was from easy to hard. And then emotion's an interesting one. So emotion is multidimensional, right? And emotion is by far the most important element of those three. We've done lots of research that shows it ties to loyalty more, right? But we picked for our measure one level of loyalty, whether you were, it was sort of the happiness measure. I forgot what the exact scale was. But if you think about emotion over the years, if you think about a company, that may not be the right measure. As a matter of fact, for many companies, I've been advising them on the notion of confidence, especially in banking. You come from banking. Yeah. I would say that one of the most important emotions for a banking customer is confidence. Do I have confidence in the bank? Do I have confidence in my money? Do I have confidence in sort of my financial situation? Those are probably more lasting and important than whether you are happy or sad about an individual interaction, right? So it was interesting. So we did have to create a single measure to create an index, right? And so I think that emotion one, I would say, was overly simplistic relative to the other two in terms of what you should be measuring with customer.
Yeah. So I had both at different times Rob Markey and Fred Reichheld on the show, and one of the things that they both said is nobody does surveys anymore. So my question is going to evolve around that was a survey that was asked of customers. What loss in relevance, if any, does that have in today's world?
So I think that, first of all, people take surveys. Surveys aren't dead. The same way bank branches aren't dead when the ATMs came out, right? They morph into different purposes and have different value. I think the pressure on surveys is that and great you talk about Rob Markey and Fred Reichheld, right? Because probably the most obsolete survey is an 11-point NPS survey, right? In today's world. And I had Fred on my show, and like Fred said, the notion of promoters and detractors and passives is still a really positive, strong one. But there are better ways to identify and to segment customers than asking an 11-point question. And people get too hung up on the question. I think that, so now we're going to go into like my view on the industry a little bit, right? Where I think that CX has run into problems, which is a lot of the people came into CX and viewed CX as a market research function, or that market research is credible. So overly index their learning and thinking about the tools they use to collect data, right? Instead of thinking, I really need to know who my promoters, passives, and detractors are so I can do something different with them and I can learn from them. So much time was spent on how do I create an instrument to ask a survey question so that, and by the way, I'm going to go off on a rant on NPS. So on one hand, what Fred and what Rob Markey did at Bain with NPS made the industry. So let's not lose that. The industry would not be where it is without NPS driving awareness, driving deployment, and many companies were successful. However, having said that, the idea that you ask an 11-point question, then you randomly decide based on that scale who is a detractor, who is a passive, and who is a promoter is kind of absurd when you could just ask that more directly, right? Like a lot of the issues there are, okay, someone gave you an 8, that means they're not a promoter. But are they a promoter? Someone gave you a 9, a promoter. So why not, if you're going to if you're going to segment customers into 4 buckets, why not let them put themselves into those 4 buckets more directly, as opposed to this chaotic sort of questioning on, all right, they're 8, are they a promoter? Well, I will tell you that an 8 in Japan is a super promoter. A 7 in Japan is a super promoter. So anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, sure.
About
There
surveys.
are cultural differences in the way people grade. The opposite is true in South Latin America, right? They tend to score higher. So I appreciate the rant, and a lot of it does make sense. And I think, the NPS, the way NPS has been used, has given both of those gentlemen heartburn for people using it incorrectly. And I think you're right. I do want to come back to your outlook on the industry, on the profession near the end. But before that, let's talk about humanity at scale. So let's talk about where it overlaps with customer experience management and where it gets new legs, where it's maybe a little different.
So I would say it is completely different. They're both mutually supportive of each other's direction.
Okay.
When as I said, I was Forrester, then Temkin Group, then Qualtrics XM Institute, and in all those environments, I was helping organizations mostly through practitioners to improve the companies. What I realized after all those years is, well, first of all, I decided I wanted to have a bigger impact on the world. And I'll tell you, I felt like I had a pretty big platform to help people when I was at Qualtrics. So it wasn't a complaint thing. I just felt like I had more in me. And so what I realized is the more in me was to step back and help leaders think about how they lead differently. Because a lot of the problems with the CX movement and CX getting prioritized and customer experience and employee experience happening ends up being that it doesn't match up with the perspective that leaders have about how they want to lead their organization. So to me, humanity at scale is a much broader topic than customer experience and employee experience. It's getting leaders to think about how they can succeed in a sustainable way by focusing more on people and recognizing that there isn't a trade-off. It's a false trade-off to believe that you either succeed as a leader or you focus on the needs of people. What I'm trying to do is inspire and empower leaders to recognize that the only path to sustainable success is by focusing more and understanding and catering to the needs of people, whether they're customers, employees, the communities that you serve, or the broader sort of world in which you live. And that's the only path to sustainable success. Now, the way they overlap is, think about a leader that cares nothing about human beings or has no understanding of human beings or doesn't drive for a human-centric organization. That type of leader will be a difficult one for a CX leader and a CX practice to thrive in. So my feeling is that if I can get leaders to be more human-centric, and I'll talk about where I'm going with that, but if I can get leaders to be more human-centric, that is much more conducive to a CX tool set and CX leaders in that environment. So I think they both work together, but I'm not out trying to tell leaders they have to care about customer experience. I'm out there trying to tell them they have to better care about human beings who happen to be customers, human beings who happen to be employees. And the better you can understand those human beings, the more successful you can be about whatever you want. You want to grow your business? Sure. You want more profits? Sure. You want to get into new markets? Sure.
So what would, and this is probably going to be a softball question to you, I admit, but what would you say to those CEO, people in the C-suite, who say, come on, Bruce, I've got quarterly reports that I have to provide to Wall Street and shareholders, and they're looking for results from us. So I've got a business to manage here. I've got social responsibility. I've got integrity of the data and the information that we have of customers nowadays, of fear of security breaches. We've got auditors breathing down our necks. I've got, revenue growth. We're trying to keep up with the competition. They're looking at things like share of market. This idea of humanity, isn't that soft, touchy-feely stuff? CX professionals know that every touch point matters. but managing the entire customer journey can be challenging, especially for enterprises due to disjointed data, difficulty aligning stakeholders, and struggling to secure executive support. That's where JourneyTrack comes in. JourneyTrack integrates journey mapping, management, and measurement, allowing you to pinpoint friction, optimize experiences, and demonstrate the ROI of CX initiatives. So you can align teams, break down silos, and then you can track improvements in real time. With JourneyTrack, you get visibility across every channel and touchpoint. No more guesswork, just clear insights and measurable results. Join the CX leaders who transform journeys into improved experiences with impactful business outcomes like reduced churn and increased customer lifetime value. Visit journeytrack.io today and see how better journeys lead to better business.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
So I would say, first of all, I'm not trying to keep you from achieving those things, the quarterly results. I'm telling you, there's a better way for you to do it that leaves a trail of sustainable success behind it, right? You can do all those things and beat up your organization and sort of make your customers unhappy and make the environment much worse. And so great, you make your quarterly numbers, but you do it in a way where you trail behind costs that you're going to have to pay at some point down the road. What I'm saying is, I don't believe that there's any trade-off you need to make in achieving those if you focus on doing them in a way that has a deep understanding and caring for the people that you impact. So that's the fundamental thing, which is like, I want to break that belief about a trade-off, that somehow you either are human-centric or you're delivering on these sets of results that you like you just mentioned. And the question about, is it soft? Like, I generally deal with large organizations. Those have been, my career has been around, the mega organizations, the housing tens of thousands of people. And if you're leading that organization and you don't recognize that everything that you do impacts hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, if you don't realize that, then you're in trouble. So you have to realize that. Then you have to say, how can I be more effective with those hundreds of thousands and millions of people? How do you not get to the point at some point where you say, I probably could hit my quarter results without pissing off 75,000 customers and 22,000 employees and have the same results. So that's one thing. And I'll jump in another one, which is I also want to get leaders to think about legacy. I think a part of the motivation that I'm going to push for is for leaders to think about what it is they're leaving behind. Because I do think that if I only care about quarterly things, I can push my organization, I can push my company in the short term to do almost anything. I can get them to comply with where I want to go. But I do think getting people to have more of a thought about, who am I? What is the legacy that I want to leave behind, both in the organization and in the community? And I think people are open to that. I think the world, a lot of the world sucks right now. People hate each other. People are mean. People aren't caring about each other, right? We're fighting more than ever. I think this is a perfect time for everyone in the world to say, I want to be a kinder, gentler type of myself and find a way to leave the world in a better place than when I found it. And so that's another stream that I hope kicks in.
Yeah, for me, when you were sharing that, it was echoes of Jim Collins' Good to Great and Level 5 Leadership. And in that book, he talked about sort of the contrast to that was Lee Iacocca at Chrysler, who was like, well, after I leave, the organization's going to tank because I really was the star.
Yeah, I think that is not the mindset that I'm shooting for.
It's more of a selfless, concerned about how the organization will actually succeed even after I'm gone.
So I would say that part is selfless. the other part, which is not selfless, which is that you will succeed better by understanding and catering to those tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of human beings who are in the ecosystem that ultimately determine the long-term success of your organization.
Bruce, can you share with us maybe a couple of different strategies on how business leaders can live out humanity at scale?
Yeah. So I think that at a base level, I think having leaders understand how human beings think, feel, and behave is critical, right? Because I think that there's a lot of things. So I in a lot of my work, I'll be propelling a lot of the core thinking around experience design, right? And understanding human beings and motivating them. So for instance, if a leader is going to have a layoff, right? We're in these environments. I'm not going to tell them they don't need to have a layoff. They might, right? Like you're running a business, that might be something to do. But designing the communications around that so that there's certainty about when it's going to happen, that shows some empathy along the way and is honest about the situation, can drive a different outcome, long-term outcome for the organization than if they did that set of layoffs in a sort of crass way that didn't understand the impact that it was going to have on not only the people you're asking to leave, but the people you're asking to stay and the people you may want to encourage to come join your company in the future and the customers who hear about it, right? So that's an example of where I'm not necessarily going to push a leader to do anything different in the strategic decision they make yet. But the decision about how you implement it can have radically different effect on your future and the success that you have going forward.
Yeah. Bruce, when I had Fred on the show, he talked about, in its simplest terms, the golden rule.
Yeah.
People talk about the platinum rule, treat others how they would want to be treated versus how you'd want to be treated. But why do so many leaders get this wrong? There's nobody listening. I'm guessing there's nobody listening to this episode who doesn't know somebody who hasn't lost their job in the last 6 months. And I'm willing to bet that those people listening, they've heard really bad stories about the way that people were let go. And I'm not even talking about, recently the Doge and the massive government layoffs. Even before that, or in parallel to that, private corporation, they're doing it really bad. Are they that out of touch? What is the reason that they just don't get it?
Yep. So I want to start with, I think the golden rule is broken. I think the golden rule is a great way for religions to have a generic view on how you treat people, but that doesn't work in organizations. Think about it. Like, does a multi-millionaire CEO, the way that person, and usually a white male, does that white male millionaire CEO, should that person be treating the people they're letting go across the organization the way that he wants to be treated? That's the golden rule. I don't buy that, right?
Yeah.
He should be, the platinum rule should be treat people the way that they should be and deserve to be treated. And that means...
It's because they're not in those shoes. They're so disconnected that they act differently?
Yes. Because, a couple things. One is that first thing happens to all of us, right? We get transactional. Right? Lots of things in front of us, and we got to do. And unless there's an interrupt, then we keep being transactional without thinking about people. So if you think about the whole practice of like meditation and mindfulness, so we'll flip from the leadership discussion to sort of the humanistic discussion, right? That the whole growth of mindfulness and of meditation grew out of, we live in a world that is chaotic and moving fast. And if we don't take the time to sit and think about how we want to be, who we want to be, and how we want to be perceived, then we continue to act in a way that's inconsistent with how we want to be seen, even though it is inconsistent, right? We don't recognize the inconsistency. We don't step up and change it. So I don't think that the leaders are mindfully deciding to do it in the non-humanistic way. I think that there's two things happening. One is they don't understand the humanistic way well enough. That's part of what I want to inspire and empower them. Inspire is getting them to think about and wanting to do it and taking a checkpoint and stopping and saying, now's the time I want to be humanistic, and empower them to figure out how to do it. So I do think that think about it this way. If Harvard Business School had a whole course and had all of their leaders have to go through humanity-centric training, which is how do you make decisions that make the most out of, get the best impact from, and utilize human beings in the most effective way, right? Then that would become part of the core mindset of a leader in how they approach problems and how they make decisions. And that's where we need to get to in the short term. We have to get them to take an interrupt and do some mindfulness type things and say, all right, I may be in the middle of this crazy thing. Let me take a moment and think about there are people involved. How can I effectively interact with those people and get the most out of them for the long term?
Bruce, let me double click on, you mentioned experience design, and those of us who have maybe been CX practitioners kind of grasp that, but there may be others listening, and since you're talking about it in terms of the way people think, feel, and behave, and that informs experience design. Can you share a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah. So if you're designing something for an experience or a decision for a human being, ultimately you're doing it because you want some outcome. You want them to behave in a different way. You want them to think in a different way, right? So you have to be explicit about what it is I want to do. So for instance, if I'm designing an experience, let's say for an employee who I'm going to let go. Let's keep on this theme, right? I'm designing an experience and I let go. We have to think about, we're not going to make them happy. Right? The goal isn't to make them happy. We have to have some other goals. The goals could be have them clarity on what's happening, provide them with as much access, easy access to whatever resources we're going to give them, and communicate that we have empathy for their situation, even though we're letting them go. Right? That might be the goal. So if we have some goals around the actions and the attitudes that we want to leave them with, then we can say, okay, how do we then put in place the steps they're going to interact with them, they're going to leave them that way? And so it sort of goes like that. And I will say that the big thing to learn in experience design, especially for a leader who's not going to be an experienced designer, right? That's not the goal, is that human beings behave based on two different systems, right? There's the rational and the intuitive. A rational is where we start and we think about every decision in terms of what the pluses and minuses are for us. You can think about if you're an ice cream stand and you're trying to decide on an ice cream and you go, well, the vanilla I like because it doesn't make my teeth colored. The raspberry I like. And then you could have this whole set of reasons why you make a decision, but you tend to make decisions more on the intuitive side, which is the cookie dough looks wonderful. I want that, right? And so part of the recognition is that human beings, while we treat them like they're very rational and they make rational decisions and behave and think rationally, they actually think intuitively more often.
I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what do you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com. That's BLUEHOST.com to start now.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
So if we can sort of create experiences that either trigger or take advantage of those intuitive moments. So for instance, one of the things we know, and Amazon realizes this, right? That when you go to Amazon and you want to buy something, you might be in a research mode, right? Where you're going to look through every option and every detail. But oftentimes you make the intuitive decision to go with a bestseller. Why do you go with a bestseller? Because it's just an intuitively easier thing than me to look at every single option I have and evaluate it on my own. So if you look at retailers, they've recognized how do they trigger this intuitive behavior much more effectively over time. And so I think it's really starts with an understanding back to leaders and experience design of recognizing that human beings respond in an intuitive way to many situations. So we have to think about what are the symbols and triggers that we have of those intuitive reactions.
Awesome. Bruce, you have been giving back to the community, to the CX community for years, for decades. What advice do you have for CX professionals and for the industry in general to lift the industry, and for people who are seeking out careers in the industry? What advice do you have?
So first of all, come into the industry, join the industry, change the industry for the better. I think that, and I'll give a pitch for it, right? At the end of the day, there aren't many levers that an organization has to succeed better than more deeply understanding, catering to the needs of its customers. So whatever it's called, there's always going to be a need of that. And if you think about the alternative of that is how many organizations succeed if they don't understand and don't cater to customers. So having said that, I do think that if I think about over the last couple of years I was at Qualtrics, I did a lot of global trips, right? Visiting companies, giving speeches around the world. And most of my discussions were not around the metrics of customer experience. They were around change management and justifying the focus. So instead of CX professionals fighting that and trying to say, yes, CX is about the metrics. Yes, CX is about the data. They should lean into it and say, all right, we need to help change the organization and get better skilled to understand how do you do that. We've published a lot, so there's a lot of resources of that. But think more, your job is not to try and push data onto the organization. Your job is to help the organization evolve and change using whatever insights you have. So that's one thing I would push for. The second thing is you had better understand AI. If you look at just some basic things, right? Like look at the call centers. There is no need to do surveys of customers on an ongoing basis, like in the long run. AI can extract whatever meaningful insights there are in enough scale from those conversations that whatever you may end up asking a customer or asking someone who is just through that should always be additive to whatever you've just learned because of the AI analysis of those conversations, right? So I'm not against surveys per se, but I'm against surveys for core understandings that you should be able to get and you need to be able to get from other conversations. So that's another thing I would understand AI. And then the third thing I would do, and this is true for any change agent, which is recognize you're a change agent, and change agents fail more than they succeed. And so you have to revel in your successes. It's like a baseball player. A good baseball player gets a hit 1 out of 3 times. You have to really enjoy that one time and not worry about those 2 times as much, right? You really have to recognize and celebrate the successes that you have.
Yeah, well said. Bruce, I want to end the show with the question that I ask all my guests based on the name of the show, which is what delights you as a customer?
So I really like proactive service. So I like it when I'm a big traveler, as you can tell, I told you, around the world. So I'm a big client of Delta. I'm at their highest non-invitation level. There's an invitation level that I'm not in it. Yeah. And so I do appreciate when every once in a while someone in the cabin, like a pilot, will come back and thank me for my loyalty. I sort of like that. It's not necessary. I like non-necessary proactive moves like that. And I will also say, if I'm on Delta, while I like that, what I really like is when I get upgraded. So that's probably the most proactive customer thing I like, is when, I'm not expecting it, although I do track where I am on the list. But when I get that call, oh my God, you've been upgraded, that's a wonderful thing.
Well, shortly after we finish up here, I'll be reaching out to Delta for sponsorship opportunities on the show. Yeah. Bruce, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's always a thrill, and I always learn so much from you. What an honor. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And thanks for doing the show.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers Podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.